All right, so let me give my little welcome here. So I'm Lisa. I'm manning the technical desk here for this meeting, and welcome to June's Talk Shop. And there we are. So here's our agenda for the day. We're going to turn this over to Lynn in a moment just to formally welcome us, although I think most of us have been here long enough to be welcomed already. And Winifred Bird is going to be doing our interviews today. Thank you, Winnie. We're lucky to have her guiding us. So we've got three people from mostly translator, I think. We're going to get the details on everyone today, but we have Brenda Hart and Susan all from Northern Nagano. We'll do interviews for about 20 minutes each. We'll stop for comfort break, probably 10 minutes, and then questions.
Thank you for coming tonight. It's wonderful to see so many familiar and not familiar faces. And especially thank you to our three speakers, guests. So Susan, hopefully you're out there. Hi, Susan. Susan Murata has been with SWET since its beginnings in 1980, when her fellow founding member, Lynn Riggs, tells me we were all single and just getting started on our careers. She was among those who helped with the newsletter in its day and provided her home as the official SWET address from 1993 to 1997 in the midst of raising her two children, who now both live in Tokyo. Raised on Ishigaki Island, Susan attended American University in the United States, but has spent the rest of her life in Japan. After earning her bachelor's degree, she spent time in Kyoto studying the history of ceramics on a mixed scholarship. She has put her practical, managerial, and bilingual skills, along with her generous personality, to use for clients in printing and advertising, research, publishing, intercultural and student exchange, and administration of the RIKEN Science Institute, where she worked until 2018. Her 4-decade-long career has encompassed not only translation, but also related roles as an all-around communications facilitator between cultures. She continues to work as a freelance translator and editor, dividing her time between a house in Suzaka, where Brenda also lives, and a cabin by Lake Nojiri. Susan, thank you for taking the time to join us this morning.
Nice to be here.
Can you start out by telling us how you ended up in Nagano and what you like about living there?
Okay, I spent a long time in Tokyo, different places in Tokyo, but when my son was born, we rented a cabin at Lake Nojiri in a community called the Nojiri Lake Association that was started almost 100 years ago by missionaries. And my parents were missionaries, so through their connection, we were able to find someone who would rent to us. And so we rented for about 5 years, and then we finally became members ourselves and had our own cabin. So we were commuting in the over summer vacation and throughout the year as the roads got better. For over 30 years, we were going back and forth. And then almost 6 years ago, my Japanese husband passed away, and my son was already independent, but my daughter was still in university. So I waited till she finished and got a job and seemed settled. And then I said, I'm out of here. And I left Tokyo for good. And I searched for a place to live that wasn't too far from my cabin. The cabin itself I didn't feel was practical because it's very heavy snow country. It's in Nagano, but it's on the border with Niigata, and the climate is much more like Niigata than the rest of Nagano. And it gets huge snow dumps in the winter. So, and the cabin is fun to be there for maybe 5 days, but after 5 days of being buried in snow, you're sort of tired of it and you want to get out. So I searched, and I originally was thinking of Obuse, where Hart lives, because we've visited Obuse a lot, and it, as he says, it's very compact, very attractive little town, and they've invested a lot into making it attractive and lots of things to see and do. But as I think Hart already mentioned, it's kind of hard to rent in Obuset. They don't have a lot of rental properties available. And I was not out to buy a place. I just wanted to rent. And then a friend said, well, what about next door, which is Suzaka, which is right next door to Obuset, a larger town, a lot more rental properties available. And I searched on the internet, and the house I'm renting right now, I found on the internet, and just a fluke. And it turned out to be a very nice part of town. And I'm in walking distance of 5 different supermarkets. and it's turned out really well. It's been 2 years.
Great. Yeah. So in addition to all the translation work you've done, it looks like you've worked as the facilitator of intercultural communication workshops, and also for 10 years as assistant to the director of a high school student exchange program. And I know that serving as that kind of bridge between cultures can be challenging and sometimes frustrating, but also a meaningful kind of work to do. Can you talk about what you found rewarding about those types of jobs?
Well, first of all, I've always viewed myself as a facilitator for the Japanese side, for the Japanese people, helping them to understand the foreigners they're having to deal with. Actually, I'm much more familiar with the Japanese people than I am with the foreigners, because I've spent most of my life in Japan. And just a few years in America, just a little bit, and a little bit of traveling, but not too much. So I'm my familiarity is working with Japanese people and trying to help them understand how foreigners react to things that they say and do. And but I have no training, no formal training in any of that. It's just mostly instinct and feeling my way. And I have made many mistakes too, but I'm always happy when I am able to help resolve a dispute, for example, between the Japanese side and the foreign side, and that both sides basically finally get it in the end. And they may not be totally happy with the solution, but they understand a little better what the other side is, why the other side is objecting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you feel that the way you interact with your clients has changed over the decades? For instance, are there things you're willing to say now that maybe you weren't in the past, or certain types of jobs that you feel okay about turning down, things like that?
Yeah. Yes, definitely. I was always a very timid person and easily overwhelmed by people who seemed a lot more experienced and knew their stuff. I mean, especially the Americans I have worked with over the decades, always have this aura of they really know what they're doing. And it's not until I got older myself and I started realizing they don't know what they're doing and they need a little help here. I've gotten a lot bolder in my old age. So I recommend it to everyone. Growing older helps, definitely, definitely.
Excellent, because we can't avoid it.
Yeah, it's easier when you're older, because especially working with Japanese people who have mostly superficial, but a greater respect for someone who is older. And so they will pay a little more attention to what you're saying. Yeah. And I've gotten bolder also. One of my jobs, I had to translate a lot of speeches and presentations made by executive directors and the president, and who's very erai and way up there. And so no one ever said anything. If he could say whatever he wanted and everybody would just kowtow. And then Susan would come along and say, you cannot use that for the title of your speech. It sounds stupid. and it will diminish your standing in the international community.
Mm.
And but I had to go through a whole wall of underlings to get there, to get that message to him. But I generally did, and it felt great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I imagine that he valued you and respected you all the more for doing that.
Well, he's been nice, and actually he's moved on to other positions elsewhere, but he has convinced his new companies to hire me as a consultant to whenever he needs to have something translated, which is only once or twice a year, but I get a nice retainer. So that's really nice.
Yeah,
I appreciate that. Yeah.
So you also spent about 15 years, I believe, managing a translation team, and later as a translator on that same team at the Scientific Research Institute, RIKEN.
Yeah.
What were the benefits of working on a team, on staff, in-house for such a large organizations, or perhaps the drawbacks, if you'd like to mention those as well, as opposed to now working on your own as a freelancer?
When I joined RIKEN, they had no translation team.
Wow.
I was hired just as a temporary assistant for a conference that was coming up, and they had a lot of foreign participants, a lot of material how to be prepared in English. And I'm no scientist, I know nothing about science. And RIKEN is huge, and it covers many fields of science. So I was just, twice a week translator, just translating little bits and pieces of documentation that they needed. But then RIKEN has a union, and the union needed something translated, and I was introduced, so I got a job from them. And then they were going to build a nursery, and the people who were starting up the nursery needed stuff in English, and they contacted me, and things grew. And so then RIKEN decided I was convenient to have around. It was convenient to have a translator in-house. So over time, they gradually increased my work time until I was finally full-time. I was still the only one in different departments. Every department, almost, not everyone, but they had their own personal gaijin in their department doing a lot of things also. So I didn't do everything for RIKEN. I was in general affairs and personnel. But then one of my bosses decided we needed to have more people, that the workload was growing as people became aware. RIKEN is a huge organization, and their administrative structure is pretty big. And when they started realizing that this convenient person was available to get that oshirase out in English or whatever, they started throwing more jobs at us. So my boss wanted me to hire more people, and that's how the team started. And I really enjoyed working on a team. I was the head of the team for a long time. And then I bumped into age 60, and all of a sudden I was shokutaku, not full-time anymore, and I couldn't be the head of the team anymore, but that was fine. I was happy to step down, but I was still working there for a few more years. So I enjoy working on a team and having people right there. You can, when you're translating something, you can turn right around and say, hey, what do you guys think of this? Or what should we do about this, that, or the other thing? And so lots of discussions about translation problems, and also how we provide our service in-house, and we have to teach the different departments what we can and cannot do, and educating them as we go along. So I found all that kind of peripheral stuff that has nothing directly to do with translation actually very rewarding and interesting for me. So it was a good environment for me.
Yeah. We just have a few minutes, but sure. I know you were also at RIKEN during the 2014 stem cell research scandal, which some of our participants may have heard of. scientists at the institution came under heavy criticism internationally for falsifying research results, and there was a bunch of fallout related to that. And I know you weren't directly involved in that, but can you just briefly talk about how that impacted you and your ability to work, your day-to-day work there?
Okay. The translation team handles notices and personnel regulations and announcements, and like I said before, the president's speeches and executive directors' presentations and things like that. But I personally was also, because I'd been there long enough that they were comfortable with me, and I think because of my age, they also felt comfortable giving me, especially the personnel division, giving me sticky jobs that needed to be kept quiet and private and not exposed to all the other translators or anybody else. So like once upon a time when they needed to fire a foreign employee and they needed to explain their reasons, they needed someone to translate those reasons and be in on the meeting when they actually fired that person and so on. Very interesting experience.
Yeah.
The STAP Bruja actually took place in RIKEN's facility in Yokohama, and I was based in Wako, Saitama, in the headquarters. So in that respect, physically, I wasn't there with all those press events and all that stuff. But they had to set up a review committee to examine the whole issue and find out what had really happened and why it happened and so on. And I was involved in translating that committee's report to be provided to groups that were involved in the issue overseas. They had to have material in English. Of course, it was not anything that was ever published or made public. So that was very interesting because it had to be done very carefully and you had to really think about the meaning of the words. It was very important to convey the same nuance. And I didn't do it alone. There were other foreign translators involved, or two others, I think. But it's not something I'd want to do frequently. It was very
Yeah. What a way to, I mean, I guess that wasn't quite the end of your work there, but what a kind of finale. Like, and it seems like it really drew on all the skills of you had built up.
Oh, and it went way beyond just translating. It was that I had become an old timer within the organization and that sort of thing. So it goes way beyond just translating, but it was a very interesting life experience, put it that way.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you for telling us a bit about that and a bit about your life. I'm sure people will have more questions in the Q&A.